Mr. President, we stand today in solidarity against Putin's grotesque escalation of missile attacks launched to the cities across the Ukraine, from Belarus, from Russia, from the Caspian Sea, from Crimea. Now, half the downpour of missiles may have been intercepted by air defences, but half, of course, hit their targets, killing civilians, taking out water, taking out heating installations to terrorise the population into submission. Ukraine urgently needs more air defences. We've already heard from President Zelensky they've only got 10% of their needs. There's a 2,500-kilometre border, and we know even in Belarus they've got rockets, missiles, drones for Iran attacking all our freedoms. Putin knows his war is illegal, as Russia, of course, was expelled from the Council of Europe for breaking rules that they'd signed up to in terms of democracy, human rights and the rule of law, and then committed an unprovoked attack on a sovereign democracy, unleashing mass killings now on civilians. He knows his referenda are also illegal in occupied areas. They're done at gunpoint. They aren't even done with the consent of the Russian people, who wouldn't vote for more land they don't need for the blood of Russian soldiers. And it's clearly farcical to suggest that that referenda somehow legitimizes the threat or use of nuclear weapons. He is losing ground, and so he's escalating into state terrorism, targeting civilians on an industrial scale in breach of the Geneva Convention. His mass call-up has backfired. Those who've been keeping their heads down in Russia are now resisting their sons being sent to their death. And hundreds of thousands are leaving Russia. And indeed, talk of a 5% income tax increase to pay for more guns isn't going down well, to pay for land Russia doesn't need. And now we have the misinformation campaign that if Putin were replaced, it would be replaced by someone even worse, which is another act of propaganda desperation. Meanwhile, China stands in support of Russia, knowing that the fall of Ukraine would trigger a green light for the invasion of Taiwan. And what's more, of course, it is rendering Russia as a dependent state on China. So vast swathes of land are now leased, of course, by China of Russian land will eventually become Russian. So we've got this farcical situation where Russia is taking over other people's territories, and over time its own territories will be taken because it's cutting itself away from the economic and political ties to the West. Ultimately, we want a return in Russia of democracy, human rights and the rule of law and economic relations. This is the price of peace, but that price will only be won with a complete military withdrawal, with international justice pursued by this body and reconciliation. And that task will require a redoubling of all our efforts in all our countries to ensure that this brutal attack and such brutal attacks in the future never again or never ever succeed.